me a word, but you can't come out and deal with it. Bro, man.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Oh, fuck out the car. Ooh, fuck out the car. Ooh, shit.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. Now, black men, I don't know how many times it's going to take for us to learn our lesson about dealing with white women. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a man, and I understand if you see somebody that's attractive, no matter what their color is, you can't help it on a biological level. But even if poison was served to you the most beautiful, elegant way imaginable, it's still poison. It'll still kill you. And historically, white women have been poison to us. Time after time, it's led to nothing but bad things. And even worse, it leads to far too much death. And it's not just black men, it's black women and children. But we still can't resist whatever biological urge we have to deal with these women. And really, it's that forbidden fruit syndrome that we have, which is really just another form of Stockholm syndrome if you want to be real about it. But over and over again, we fall for the same thing and we get burnt every single time. In Wisconsin, a young brother named Quintez Cephis, he got caught up messing with white girls. And now him going to a good college, and he gets to play football on a well-known college football team. And he had a chance to make it to the NFL. And now he's facing 50 years in prison because he wanted to mess with some white girls.
First at 4, Badgers wide receiver Quintez Cephis will be facing felony charges in Dane County Court on Thursday morning.
Our Melissa Kim has been following this story since it broke on Saturday afternoon and joins us with the very latest. What is he facing, Melissa?
Well, guys, according to court records now, Cephis is facing 2 charges, one on third-degree sexual assault and another second-degree sexual assault of an intoxicated victim. Both of those are felonies. Now, Madison police releasing a statement today saying that officers met with a woman in the emergency room in April who said she was the victim of sexual assault. She said it took place in his apartment and identified Cephis. Now, police say Cephis was cooperative when they talked to him, but during their investigation, police say another victim came forward to say she was also the victim of a sexual assault by Cephis. Now, the Badgers wide receiver announcing on Saturday that he would take a forced leave of absence from the football team because he was facing what he called quote-unquote unspecified charges from the Dane County District Attorney's Office. Now, in his statement posted on Twitter Saturday, Cephis said that he had been wrongfully accused of unlawful conduct and was innocent of any allegations associated with this consensual relationship. Now, the team did practice today. I spoke to wide receiver A.J. Taylor afterwards. He, along with other players on the team, voiced their support for their fellow teammate.
We're definitely a very close group of receivers. Like, you know, we all love each other. But with it, yeah, I mean, we're all going to support each other. You, Danny, Ken, we're all going to support each other. And we're just going to, come together and work even harder.
Now, Cephis spent the last 5 games of last season recovering from a broken leg that happened at Indiana last year. His return to the field was a highly anticipated one. He led the team in touchdown catches last year.
Now, this young brother Quintez Cephis, after having a threesome with 2 white girls, and we'll see if he think that threesome was worth it. And no disrespect to this young brother, and I'm not trying to make fun of him, but if your name is Quintez Cephis, you're the last person that need to get caught messing with white girls. Now, one of the white girls, and of course they're not releasing their names because they want to protect them, but she went to the cops and said that this brother raped her. And this brother did go and cooperate with the police. But during the investigation, the other white girl comes forward and says she was also raped. Now, even though it was a threesome and they were there at the same time, I guess it took the other girl a little longer to figure out she was raped or something. I don't know. But these 2 white girls said they were too drunk to consent. A surveillance camera showed them walking in this building. They were unimpaired, and they were conscious enough to walk in. Now, they all admit that white girl was drinking, but a surveillance camera also showed her walking out of the building still unimpaired, conscious enough to stand there and have a conversation with them. This white girl was even conscious enough to send him a text message a couple hours later asking about her pipe she left. She even sent kissing and heart emojis, as if everything was all good. And he probably felt on top of the world. But then the next thing you know, the judge in this case, Judge Jill Karofsky, denied a motion to dismiss the case. Despite all the evidence he has, the word of 2 white women is more important than any evidence you can get. And so the judge decided to move forward with the charges.
In other news today, accused UW football player Quintez Cephis was in court today.
He's facing multiple charges of sexual assault. Our Keely Arthur shares why his defense team says he is innocent. Keely?
That's right. The wide receiver is facing 2 charges, one for second-degree sexual assault, another for third-degree sexual assault. The alleged victims, 2 women, told police they were intoxicated one night in April when Cephis assaulted them. Now the defense is trying to get that second-degree sexual assault charge thrown out.
Quintez is innocent.
Quintez Cephis' defense team saying they have evidence to back that up.
There were 3 people in that bedroom that night, and all 3 of them know the truth. And we want all the facts to come out to establish the truth.
Today, Cephis' defense filed a motion to preserve evidence which they believe could prove the suspended UW football player's innocence. That was granted. They filed another motion to dismiss the second-degree sexual assault charge altogether because they say they can prove the woman was not intoxicated past the point of being able to consent. One way they plan to do that? Text messages, including one conversation in which the alleged victim in that charge text Cephis at 3:14 a.m. after the alleged assault, asking if she left her jewel, a vape instrument, behind, followed by a heart and kiss emoji, which the defense says signified positive feelings towards Cephis. The court has yet to grant that motion. If convicted of both charges, Cephis could spend up to 50 years in prison for crimes those who came to support him in court today say he's incapable of committing.
He's a part of our family. He's a son to me. He's a brother to the 3 daughters that me and my wife have. And he's a great young man, and I can't wait for all the facts to come out so that he can be exonerated.
Now, Cephis is not allowed to have contact with either alleged victim. Another football player, Danny Davis, who was allegedly present at the time, is not currently facing criminal charges, but is suspended from 2 football games.
Now, this Judge Jill Karofsky, who of course is a white woman herself, chose to side with the white women despite the evidence, because it's all about how this white girl feels. I guess she sobered up enough to text his brother at 3 o'clock in the morning about her peace pipe. I guess she sobered up enough to text his brother at 3 o'clock in the morning when she found out her pipe was missing. And she was sober enough to type heart emojis. But the judge said none of that matters. It only matters how drunk she was doing the threesome. And that their word is enough to charge him with sexual assault.
Badger wide receiver facing sexual assault charges will go to trial.
Quintez Cephis was in court today where his attorneys tried to dismiss the case. Amanda Quintana is live from the Dane County Courthouse with what happened during today's hearing. Amanda?
Yes, well, after arguing about what names to call the alleged victims in the courtroom and then whether the criminal complaint paints the full picture of what happened on that night in April, the judge decided there is probable cause to go to trial.
The state has met its burden and has shown to a level of probable cause that a felony was committed and that Mr. Cephis is the individual who probably committed that felony.
Badgers receiver Quintez Cephis will go to trial, facing second and third degree sexual assault charges, crimes that could put him in prison for 50 years. But his defense says the accounts of the 2 women accusing him of rape are unreliable.
Every fact is going to be hotly contested. And we think and believe that at the end of this case, when all the facts are known, that what we've said from the very beginning will be demonstrated, that all 3 people who were in that room that night knew exactly what they were doing.
His attorneys plan to argue that the women weren't drunk, saying surveillance footage from Cephas' apartment contradicts that.
She never needs assistance in walking. She climbs upstairs without any assistance. And she converses, as I've previously indicated, with Mr. Cephis and has no difficulty standing.
Along with a text message from the other woman early the next morning asking for an item she might have left behind.
Demonstrates, and I think there is a singular meaning here, that she knew where she had been, she knew who she was with, that she had left something at his apartment, and that she was capable of sending a coherent text.
The state hoping to prove it doesn't matter how drunk they were, it's the fact that they were incapable of giving consent.
I'm innocent. I know the truth. They know the truth. And, you know, I look forward to clearing my name and fighting for who I am.
Now, in that criminal complaint, his roommate and fellow football player, Danny Davis, says he thought the girls were drunk, so this might become an issue once we go to trial. Now, after court, we asked Cephis how he feels about going to trial, since this means he's going to probably miss the entire football season. And at that point in the interview, he decided to stop commenting and leave.
Now, this white girl probably got caught by her dad or her boyfriend or her brother or somebody. And then to cover it up, she yelled rape. And then her friend got on cold quick. And it seems to be the same cycle throughout history over and over again. But we still just gotta have a white girl. This young brother Quintez Cephis is lucky this ain't 1918 or even 1958. They probably would have drug him out of court, tortured him, and hung him right there in the middle of town. At this point, after all of this history, interracial dating could be considered treasonous. It's disrespectful to ancestors like Jesse Washington, who was lynched in 1916. They accused him of raping and killing a white woman. They made this 17-year-old kid who was mentally ill, and when I say mentally ill, he was really mentally ill. They made him sign a confession, and he didn't even know what it was. And I'm sure he didn't have proper representation. They probably didn't even let black lawyers in the court. It took an all-white jury 4 minutes to say he was guilty, after a 1-hour trial. Then the courts released him to a lynch mob of 15,000, where they beat him, tied him up, and then set a fire. They started lifting the 17-year-old brother in and out of the fire. And when he started to grab the tree to try to pull himself up, they cut each one of his fingers off. During the process, of course, they cut his dick off, and then they gave it to some white woman. And as he was burning, they was throwing salt on his wounds. They lifted him in and out of the fire for 2 hours. Mind you, his trial was only 1 hour. If that's not enough, how about people like Will Brown? A random white girl said a black man raped her, and then she identified him. The police gave him over to a lynch mob. They beat him, then they hung him, then they shot him 100 times. That led to the 1919 race riots in Omaha. Or how about somebody like Cleo Wright? It's disrespectful to him. They said he tried to rape a white woman, and when the police tried to arrest him, he actually cut one of the cops. So the police ended up shooting him 8 times. Then while he was in the jail cell filled with bullets, the police let a mob come in there, pull him out. They tied him to a car and drove him to the black part of town. And they pulled up in front of a black church on a Sunday morning. And his brother Cleo Wright was actually still alive, and they set him on fire right in front of the black church while they were in service. Then the court said no crime was committed because he was already shot 8 times, so he was going to die anyway. They let this white mob drag this brother into their community and set him on fire in front of a church, and they didn't do anything but wait on what the courts say. And we damn sure don't do anything today. In fact, we'll be the first ones fighting to go date him. We make every excuse in the book. But as long as there's white supremacy, you cannot date them. And it's always going to be dangerous to marry and procreate with them. If you want to only date white people, make it your mission to destroy white supremacy. Then you can date all the white people you want. But as long as we're subject to their rules, their laws, and their punishments, then they will flip on you in a heartbeat, especially these white women. Either we learn our lesson or our blood will continue to be shed.
A Butts County man says his life turned upside down after a Jackson police officer falsely claimed he'd shot her. Police investigated. They interviewed Rodriguez Scott about Officer Sherry Hall's accusations, but investigators ultimately determined that Hall lied about the shooting and had actually shot herself. Well, tonight, Fox 5's Portia Bruner reports Scott is still dealing with the consequences of a crooked cop's claims.
It's been hard for me to go places without people throwing me out, saying.
Rodriguez Scott says the days and weeks after Jackson police officer Sherry Hall claimed she was shot by a black man were very difficult for him. Within hours of the shooting on September 13th, GBI investigators contacted the 40-year-old Jackson native to question if he was involved in the shooting. Scott says he agreed to allow investigators to search his home and his car. He says they then searched his body for gunshot wounds, since Hall told her colleagues she fired at the gunman.
They also made me take my clothes off in front of my one-year-old daughter. I mean, that made me feel ashamed. I was embarrassed. I mean, I felt like a cattle.
Authorities ultimately determined Officer Hall was lying, but Scott says he didn't know that until the press conference where investigators announced the whole story was made up to cover up what really happened, an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound at the hands of an officer who'd only been on the job for 3 months.
What we thought was a victimless crime is in fact a crime with a victim. I want to be very clear. Our issue is not with the GBI's investigation. However, the investigation was prompted by a lie from a police officer from the city of Jackson.
Apology, I don't know if it will help me or not. Maybe it will, maybe not.
Portia Bruner, Fox 5 News.
Well, the GBI spent 600 hours investigating Hall's claims. Investigators charged Hall with 4 felonies, making false statements, tampering with evidence, interference with government property, and violation of oath of office. She's no longer on the Jackson police force.
I'm babysitting, right? Y'all see, look, I got 2 kids in the backseat with me. I'm babysitting. There's this lady across the street. We just came from Subway and Walmart. This lady over here, she's following me.
A Cobb County man says someone called the police on him for babysitting while black. Corey Lewis says he was babysitting 2 children when a white woman approached him in a parking lot.
And he says she wanted to see whether the children were okay and even followed him to his house.
Yeah, I did, and they're all just shocked over this whole thing. They still can't believe it. They've known each other for a couple of years. They're good friends, and they say it's just astounding that someone would see Corey Lewis with the 2 children alone and think it's strange enough that they would call police to report a suspicious person.
I'm babysitting, right? Y'all see, look, I got 2 kids in the backseat with me. I'm babysitting. There's this lady across the street. We just came from Subway and Walmart. This lady over here, she's following me.
Stunned at what was happening, Corey Lewis turned to Facebook Live. He was babysitting 10-year-old Addison and her little brother Nicholas. He says after taking the kids to lunch, he was approached by a woman in the parking lot, wanting to know if she could talk to the children to see if they were okay, and taking down Lewis's license plate number.
From her perception, she'd seen something that wasn't right. She's being judgmental. Me looking the way I am, being with 2 kids who don't look like me.
Lewis says the woman followed him to a gas station, then all the way to his house about 5 minutes away. The next thing he knew, police showed up, wanting to talk to the kids.
Hey, can y'all step out?
I talked to Cobb County Police, who told me they were responding to a call of a suspicious person. The officer talked to the children, determined everything was okay, and they were gone. But the whole experience left Lewis and the children upset. Lewis has spent plenty of time with these kids. Nicholas is part of Lewis's after-school youth mentoring program, inspired by Lewis. Now, their dad had to explain to his children what happened and why.
I asked him, did you understand what happened tonight? And he said, well, a weird lady was following us around because Mr. Lewis has brown skin and we have peachy skin.
Made me feel like it was definitely wrong and that people shouldn't be racist and it doesn't matter what skin color we are.
Lewis says after that Facebook post, he has gotten plenty of support, and it has helped shed some light on the fact that there are still some people out there who are very judgmental.
This lady here is calling the cops on me because I was getting ready to put money in a meter or whatever, and she has nothing else better to do and asked me if I was breaking into my car. Says she's going to call the cops, and I'm actually going to wait for them to prove that this is my vehicle because she has nothing else better to do. This lady here is calling the cops on me.
Corvante Davis narrates his encounter with a woman Tuesday at St. Paul in Milwaukee, near the Milwaukee Public Market.
I was getting ready to put money in a meter or whatever, and she has nothing else better to do and asked me if I was breaking into my car.
Davis tells 12 News the woman said she was calling police.
So I hit unlock, it wouldn't open, so I went around to the other side, and I opened the door after hitting unlock, and by that time, I hear this lady like shouting, screaming, "Dude, why are you breaking into that car? Whose car is that? Does it belong to you?"
Davis waited for police to arrive, figuring it'd look bad if he left. They quickly verified the car was his, but by then the woman was gone. He's convinced this was more than a case of see something, say something.
Stereotyping, racial profiling, maybe she thought the vehicle didn't belong to me, but if that's why you ask questions, you don't jump to conclusions.
Davis says he only decided to post the video online when he was encouraged by family and friends.
I wasn't going to. I don't typically like to play the race card, they say, but in a matter of 24 hours, it garnered over 40,000 views, and it's still climbing, and hopefully these situations can be resolved.
Christine Dan, according to the 911 call, the woman who called the police said she felt threatened by the man's presence because recently there had been burglaries in the area, but she didn't have any suspects' descriptions.
Yes, I want somebody here. I can't go back to my house. I understand. Because of this man, and I'm feeling threatened.
It was a 911 call one man feels could have been avoided and wouldn't have happened if he wasn't black.
You don't have to call 911 on me. Talk to me. Ask me my name.
Ezekiel Phillips was parked in his car on Ramillo Avenue in Long Beach on May 30th. He had just dropped someone off and decided to take a 30-minute break before going to his yoga class around the corner. That's when he says a woman walked up to his car.
You're not supposed to be here. This is a good neighborhood. So at that moment, I'm like, wait, hold up. Have a good day, ma'am. Now I'm going to stay. And I rolled my window up.
The verbal exchange escalated from there.
She took her phone out. I guess started taking pictures, filming whatever she was doing. Hey, I went to film school. I can take film as well. So I got out the car. I started filming her. As soon as I started filming her, what are you doing? Leave me alone. I'm feeling threatened. Help, help. It was one of those.
The woman called for Long Beach police to come to her street.
I noticed him 2 houses up from my parents' house, and I'm like, and then he's waving to me, and I don't know who he is. I go, why are you sitting in your car in our neighborhood? And he goes, I'm resting. And I said, well, you were a few blocks back.
As she walked to her neighbor's house, Phillips followed her.
He won't leave me alone.
Listen to me. Ma'am, I'm going to repeat this back so I have it right. 8, the number 8, A as in Adam.
I can't get away from this.
Ma'am.
Get away from me.
At one point, I wanted to leave because I'm like, you know what? I don't have time. I don't have the energy. But I thought about it. If I leave, it's looking like I'm guilty of whatever she's talking about.
My name's Leah. I'm with Fox 11. We spoke to that neighbor whose house the woman went to. He didn't want to speak on camera, but says he only called 911 because the woman asked. Other neighbors tell us the woman's actions were racist.
We all don't feel that way. I don't think if somebody were white sitting in their car that somebody would have called the police. I don't. I think it's horrible. It's acting Trumpish. It's okay to be a racist, and it's not.
We tried finding the woman's home and called her several times. No answer as to why she felt threatened or why she stated Phillips attacked someone. A statement Long Beach police say was not true.
Yeah.
When you say he attacked the other person, what did he do to them? Are you able to
talk? He was trying to give his business card to this other guy that I'm proof that he didn't do anything to me.
It's no longer cool to allow your discomfort to say that my discomfort is more valuable than the potential fact that this call, your life can be taken.
I spoke with Long Beach police. They say they didn't file an incident report because no crime was made at the time. However, they did note that they feel the woman did the right thing, that if you see something, say something. If you feel something or someone in your area is suspicious, they would like you to reach out to them. So that's the word from police. As for Ezekiel, he says he wants this to be a teaching moment to all people that they should talk with one another instead of always depend on reaching out to police.
Just because I put cuffs on you doesn't mean I have to be disrespectful to you.
She says it's time for people to wake up
She also says police need to honor their oath.
Nakia Jones spent over 20 years patrolling Northeast Ohio's streets, but a viral Facebook video took her message around the world. Tonight, she talked to News 5 anchor Frank Wiley about what's next.
Danita Nakaya says the book that she wrote, The Truth Divided, is what she stands by. And she said that's the case even if some of the people she served don't stand with her.
Grainy video of a black man's body, blitzed by officers, beaten by batons, was her calling.
If you want to make a difference in a situation, you got to get in the situation.
Nakaya Jones says she held her oath about where her badge sat, but her word always shined brighter.
Serve is the most important thing.
Flashing lights drew her in, even though the public's view of officers seemed dimmer.
I knew in my heart it's been a problem for a while.
Peace swapped for violence.
He was like, "Mom, you got to watch this video."
Her son admitted he was afraid of police. Both watched Alton Sterling, a Louisiana man, lose life at the hands of officers.
I wear that blue uniform proudly.
Inside, a riot burned.
If you are white and you working in a black community and you are racist, you need to be ashamed of yourself. You stood up there and took an oath.
A 7-minute purge on Facebook Live, and she'd never felt so disconnected.
I felt like none of the officers stood by me.
But people did. She wrote about it.
You're my hero.
The Truth Divided. Her dismissal from Warrensville Heights Police Department left her broken.
You took everything from me for nothing.
She says an injury kept her out of work for a while.
But I knew why they fired me. I already knew.
Why?
Because of the video.
Video pulled her in.
I am my brother and my sister's keeper.
She insists it won't push her out.
And Jones spent 15 years with Warrensville Heights. She was terminated last fall, accused of fraudulently using sick leave. In March, she filed a federal suit.
This photo disturbing. We've blurred the faces of the students, but you can see them in the photo, standing with their feet on another student who is African American. The original Snapchat was titled, "We Got Us One." The Moody High School principal says the photo is being fully investigated, and all the students involved are friends and participated voluntarily as a joke. Here's a shot of them all together, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling. The principal says it was taken the same day as the other, and as you can see, they're wearing the same clothes. In a statement released today, Principal Chris Walters says the photo does not reflect the values of our school, and he doesn't believe the picture reflects the values of the students involved. St. Clair County School Superintendent Jenny Seals also released a statement saying there is nothing funny about the picture, calling it offensive and unacceptable. She says all students will be disciplined appropriately.
All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, what we have to understand, living in this system, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you believe. That's why it's important for us to put our tribalisms and our beliefs to the side so we can do what we have to do. But in this system, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, if you're an elder, if you're a kid. They still treat you with that same harshness, that same brutality. They still see us all as the same. In Chicago, a young 18-year-old brother, Broshad McIntosh, was shot and killed by the police. So let's see what made the Chicago police shoot this 18-year-old brother while he was running away.
All right, sir, going back to the 24th of August, 2014, what was your duty status?
On duty.
2 days after the shooting, the officer who killed Rashad McIntosh was interviewed by the Independent Police Review Authority, which is known as IPRA. Chicago PD hasn't identified the officer publicly, so we'll refer to him as Officer S. There is no video of the actual shooting, but Cynthia points out a surveillance camera with a view of the house where it happened.
And this is the camera here. It's what captured it all.
Cynthia and her lawyer were allowed to see the video at IPRA's office. This is the first time I'm seeing it. This is it. This is August 24th, 2014, the day of the shooting.
What time did you begin your shift?
1900.
It's 7 p.m. Officer S is about to start his shift when he says a gang enforcement officer comes into the office with a tip that there are 2 guys somewhere on this street who have guns. So they drive to the location.
We pull up in front of
Polk. There's approximately 10 people standing on the sidewalk.
When you arrived, how was the lighting in the area?
In daylight.
And how about the weather?
Hot, clear. I see officer say to somebody, hey, come here, and I see a male fleet westbound.
Officer S runs after him, and here we lose them. We don't have any footage of the actual shooting.
I immediately run west.
The man runs through a gangway on the left side of the house, while Officer S runs on the right side through an empty lot and reaches an alley in the back.
I see this offender that I saw run from officers wearing the dark shirt, male black with dreads, appear up out of the gangway. It's a couple steps to come up, holding a silver handgun in his right hand. Seeing that he had a gun, I drew my weapon, announced my officer as police, told him to stop. He saw me coming up out of the gangway. He turned right and went up onto the porch. He goes up the porch and moves to his left. I approach him through the yard. I get to within 10-15 feet of him. Verbal direction, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. He has the gun pointed at me in his right hand. At that time, I fired my weapon in fear of my life.
All right. And was he saying anything to you?
He did not say a thing.
Okay.
Less than 15 minutes into his shift, Officer S shoots the black man he says pointed a gun at him. The black man Cynthia Lane would later identify as her 19-year-old son, Rashad McIntosh. About a year later, IPRA would find that the use of deadly force was objectively reasonable and within policy. Rashad, the report said, posed an immediate threat to Officer S's safety. IPRA did not recommend disciplinary action against the officers, and the Cook County State Attorney did not file criminal charges.
So according to the police, an informant said that 2 men on the block where all those people supposedly had a gun. And I guess they would have just searched everybody and violated everybody's Fourth Amendment rights if the brother didn't take off running. But this brother, Rashad McIntosh, did take off running, which has been punishable by death since 1793. Thanks to the Fugitive Slave Act. But the police initially said they saw this brother with a handgun as they chased him to the back porch. And Officer Robert Schlechter, the cop who fired the shots, said this brother pointed the gun right at him and disobeyed his orders, so he had no other choice but to open fire. Of course, he feared for his life. And of course, the cops got on code. And another cop, Officer Patrick Browery, said he saw him point the gun at him. And another cop, Officer Sarat Sampson, and he's Asian and Pacific Islander mixed or something like that. But he said he was 15 to 20 feet away and he saw everything. He said he saw this brother Rashad McIntosh point his gun. And they said they found a 9mm at the scene. But they didn't even have his fingerprints on the gun, and they didn't even trace the gun to see where it came from. But the police were saying it doesn't matter. Just because his fingerprint's not on it doesn't mean he wasn't holding it. And you even have eyewitnesses that said he didn't have a gun. But of course the police said those witnesses aren't credible. The only witnesses they said were credible happened to be the nameless, faceless witnesses that agreed with the cop story. And those were the only ones they put in the file. And despite whatever the evidence says, it goes without saying that they justified this shooting.
It's what it's open field at, right here. What you see where them people's at? That's how it was the night when he got killed.
So this is where it happened, Miss Cynthia?
Yes, yes.
Cynthia was at a barbecue when she heard Rashad was shot. As soon as she got to the scene, word had already spread of what happened to Rashad. And she says that what she heard didn't match the officer's statements. The one thing Cynthia and the officers agree on is how the narrative starts. Rashad was hanging out in front of this house when officers arrived.
You see 3 detective cars coming up, turning off California onto Polk real fast. And they just swooped up in here and jumped out with their guns out on everybody. And then my son, they said, supposedly took off and turned and ran through the gate and ran through the back way. And that's where he went end up back there.
This is where the officer's story and Cynthia's story diverge.
They say he came out on his knees with his hands way up. Please don't shoot, I don't got none. And he coming down on his knees, begging for his life, and he shot and killed them anyways.
These aren't just minor discrepancies. The difference between the officer's story and Cynthia's story is the difference between a justified shooting and an unjustified one. Cynthia filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Chicago, alleging that the killing of her son was unlawful and that officers conspired with one another to cover it up, something the city of Chicago denies. I needed to talk to someone who was there that day, so I went back to the scene in June and started knocking on doors, hoping to find someone who saw the shooting firsthand.
I'm Rosa, very nice too.
These two men didn't want to appear on camera or tell their story to the police because they say they're afraid of police retaliation.
Well, during that time, we was playing cards on the lot.
Remember the empty lot Officer S ran through to get to the backyard? Both witnesses say they were right here, playing cards, in full view of the back porch and the shooting.
One of the young guys jump up and run through the gangway. Police take chase.
I'm looking at him, he come up the stair with both of his hands on the banister, pulling himself up. So he couldn't have had a gun in his hand, using both hands on the banister. That officer that came back here was standing right here. He had his gun pointing through the banister. We were standing right here. So I told him, I said, don't shoot him, man. I said, I can get him down. I walked over and told him to come from up here before they kill him. You can see he was scared. I can see that in his eyes. That's why I told him, come from up there before they shoot you down, man. First he shot 2 times. I hear the bullets hit the wall. The cop told him to come out after he fired the first 2 rounds. He said, I'm coming out. So the cop said, come out with your hands up. And he put his hands out, and when he stepped out, he shot him.
Did the police ever say, drop the gun?
No.
Because that's what the documents say, that the police say, drop the gun, drop the gun.
No, I didn't hear no police say drop no gun. He told him come out with your hands up.
You know, to see someone shot down in front of your face like that, an unarmed kid, you know, for no reason. You just shot a young boy for nothing.
A young black man.
Now, did the police interview either of you?
No.
About what you saw?
No. All the police did was put us out the lot and out the alley.
Now, after they justified the shooting, they didn't realize it was caught on a security camera. The actual shooting wasn't caught on camera, but it caught enough to contradict the cops so much that 2 of them had to change their story. It turns out Officer Sarat Sampin, the Asian and Pacific Islander cop, he said he was 15 to 20 feet away, but he was never that close. He was still on the front. And after the video came out, he changed the story and said he didn't actually see what happened, but he said he did see him have a gun, even though the witness said he never heard the cops yell gun, and another cop initially said he never saw a gun. After the video came out, he changed his story. He said he did see a gun. But after so many contradictions, and the Independent Police Review Authority, who investigated the case, got dissolved for being so biased, and it probably had to be bad for them to be dissolved. But even though the police still are caping, they decided to reopen the case.
There are conflicting stories about what happened on August 24th. So, is somebody lying? Did Rashad have a gun? And if he did he point it at a police officer? These are the key questions that would unravel this whole case. The answers aren't quite so simple. 6 officers told IPRA they either saw Rashad point a gun at Officer S or saw it on the porch after Rashad was shot. But in her lawsuit, Cynthia claims the officers conspired to file false reports and that it's not the first time police officers have covered for each other in Chicago. Unlike the Laquan McDonald case, there's no dash cam footage of the back porch where Rashad was shot. So I wanted to investigate Rashad's shooting myself.
We're headed to IPRA. That's the Independent Police Review Authority.
We actually obtained the full accounts, the interviews with the police officers. I got reams of records obtained from IPRA, the police, the medical examiner, basically from every government agency involved in the IPRA investigation. You see, in my experience, People can lie. People can make things up. But if you look closely enough, you can find clues in the paperwork that lead to the truth.
If we do the math, we received 104 photographs in the first disc. This email says that there's an additional 16.
And sure enough, I had several big questions after I looked through the documents. The first one, the sergeant. The sergeant tells IPRA investigators there are 3 cars in the police caravan and that he's the driver of the 3rd car. That's him right there. And then Rashad runs. The sergeant then jumps in his car and says he goes around the block, through an alley, to get to the back of the house. His statement says, "As I was driving eastbound down the alley, I heard 3 to 4 gunshots. I slammed on my brakes and exited my vehicle." As he's running towards the porch, he says he heard officers yelling, "Drop the gun, drop the gun." The sergeant runs into the yard after Officer S has shot Rashad. Now, let's go through that again and pay close attention. There is the sergeant. He says he was in the back alley when the shots were fired, slammed on his brakes, and got out of his car. Now look carefully. This is the sergeant driving away. And look here, see how everyone ducks? This appears to be when the shots are fired. The timestamp on the video matches the time of the shooting on the police report. 2 law enforcement experts agree. The sergeant is still here, not in the back alley close to the back porch where the shooting happened, right here in front of the house. He doesn't slam the brakes and doesn't get out of his car. It's a glaring inconsistency, but does it put into question the sergeant's entire account of what happened?
Okay, so.
And I also noticed this.
This is video number 3.
This is one of the videos we got from IPRA. It came on a disc with no description, so I didn't know what to expect.
There's the scene.
This is the gangway Rashad ran through.
Wait, that means he's on the porch right there, isn't he?
This remains the only footage we have of the porch that day.
There's the white cap. This is a different vantage point. There's the gun. There is a gun at the scene.
Did
Rashad own a gun?
No, never. That's what I'm saying. Never owned a gun. Never. I didn't allow that, in my house or none of that.
And then there's this. We asked IPRA if they had traced the gun, which would tell us who bought it and where. But they told me they had no documentation showing the gun was traced. We also wanted to know if Rashad's fingerprints were on the gun. And when we looked at the analysis by Illinois State Police,
When they examined them, they reveal no latent impressions suitable for comparison. If that's the case, if Rashad was holding the gun at the time of the shooting, I would guess that there would be some fingerprint of him on the weapon.
I even reached out to the paramedics. They treated Rashad at the scene, and I wanted to ask them if they saw a gun on the porch that day. I tried calling.
And your brother was the paramedic at the scene.
But they never returned my phone calls.
Now, even though they reopened the case, they still aren't telling the family anything. And they did try to criminalize this brother, but he didn't have a violent past. He had no gun history. He had no gang history. So they can only criminalize him so much. Meanwhile, the cop, Cyrus Sampson, he does have a history with misconduct, including one excessive force case on a minor. He hit him repeatedly with a gun. He pepper sprayed him. He beat him up. And then he poured mop bucket water on his head. This cop said, tell him what the guns and drugs are or he's going to jail. And then when the guy asked the cops for some water, they offered him a cup of boric acid. Then they arrested him anyway. Other cops at the department had to send him to get medical attention. Then he had another case where he ran in this dude's apartment. He tased him. He kicked his mom in the face. He shot his dog. And then said if he don't tell him where the drugs and guns are, they were going to take his sister away. The cop, Officer Robert Schleckler, the one who fired the shots, he also has a history of misconduct. Him and another cop violated a black woman. A female cop strip searched her while the other male cops were watching. The woman only had on a t-shirt and they made her bend over and spread her cheeks. Then the woman cop lifted her shirt up and lifted her bra up while the other male cops were watching. And even though they didn't find any drugs on her, they still arrested her and filed a false police report on her. But it doesn't matter if he was 79 or 19. It doesn't matter if he's an elder or if he's a little kid. We live in a system that sees us all as the same. The exact same thing happened to a 12-year-old little boy, Deonta Terrell Farrell. Before Tamir Rice, the Arkansas police shot this little kid down. The cop, Officer Eric Samus, said he was on a stakeout when he saw a suspect talking about this 12-year-old little kid who appeared to have a gun. And when this young brother, Deonta Farrell, didn't follow those almighty commands from the cop, he said he feared for his life and shot and killed this 12-year-old kid, only to find out after he shot him that it was a toy gun. But of course, a trained cop wouldn't know the difference between a toy and a real gun. Now, these are just two little boys coming from the store, walking down the street with chips and soda, when two undercover cops jump from behind a dumpster, and within seconds, a 12-year-old boy is laying on the ground shot. The cops even tried to say he made a move, but why would you make a move with a toy gun? And there are witnesses that say he didn't even have a toy gun. They only had chips and the soda. But of course, they justified it. Our kids walking down the street with the soda or an Arizona iced tea pose a threat to the cops. So much so it can get them killed. And these are cops that have been trained and retrained over and over again. Every time somebody's killed, they have a training session and call it a day. But this will continue to happen until we stand up for ourselves. Until them harming us, especially our children, means more to us than whatever our beliefs is. And the only way that'll happen is if we put aside our tribal differences and do what we have to do.
One more thing stood out to me.
When was your dating appointment to the Chicago Police Department?
January 3rd, 2005.
Okay. Did you observe a firearm?
Did I? No, I did not see a firearm.
Okay. Did...
After a pause in the recording, the IPRA investigator resumes questioning the officer.
Where were you when you heard the shots fired?
I was in the gangway behind the door.
Okay. Did you ever approach on the porch?
No.
Okay. Did you observe a firearm of any type?
From my view from the backyard, no, I could not. All I could see was the suspect on the porch, so I could see his body face down.
Okay.
Couldn't see anything else on the porch.
Okay.
In your eyes, does that mean anything significant?
No, because he again reiterates he didn't see a firearm. So it's not like he changed his testimony at any given.
This is Art Roderick. He's a former U.S. Marshal. We asked him to look at IPRA's investigation as a law enforcement expert, since Chicago PD doesn't comment on pending litigation. He says that pretty much everything that happened that day appears to be standard procedure.
So what I saw here is what I used to do every day for basically 25 years. He bolts. Now, why is he running? What's in his head? I have a handgun. Very possibly. I mean, allegedly he has a handgun. I look at that too. I mean, what was in his head when the police pulled up?
We checked with local authorities to see if Rashad had previous gun charges and found he had 3 unrelated arrests. But Chicago police arrest records show he had not been arrested with a gun and had no gang affiliations, something Chicago PD confirmed. How quickly the officers pulled their guns was something that seemed alarming to me too.
He's withdrawing his weapon at 7:09:52 as he's exiting.
But Art didn't make much of it.
If you remember the initial call that came in, 2 individuals with guns. It's not a call of somebody selling drugs on the corner. It's a call for 2 individuals carrying some pretty deadly weapons. So immediately I would come out with a handgun.
For most of the questions I had, Art had a possible explanation. Remember how I wondered about the lack of fingerprints on the gun?
I kind of dispute that.
Okay,
It
so
just says
please
yeah, it says
educate me.
none could be lifted.
Okay.
That doesn't mean there wasn't any fingerprint. They could have been smeared, they could have been rubbed based on who knows what happened. It would be different if it said it was wiped clean.
And while these 2 men who say they witnessed the shooting say Rashad was killed for no reason.
Eyewitnesses, I'm always very leery of them until you can corroborate it with other eyewitness statements. You could put 10 of them witnessing something and you might get 10 different versions of what actually occurred.
But what about the sergeant's account?
There are the 3 cars.
There he is.
There's the sergeant. And we're going to see these people react to those gunshots here in the next few seconds. There it is. There's the sergeant's car. He's in the front, not in the back.
I mean, his statement is definitely incorrect if he's saying that he was in the alley at the time that he heard the shots.
Which is what his statement says.
What he clearly says, though, is I did not see the shooting.
Right.
I heard the shots. I mean, you got to realize police are human beings. These are the inconsistencies I would hope to find.
Really? You would hope to find these type of
I would hope to find these types of inconsistencies.
If all of the police officer accounts
said exactly the same
same
thing, I would be, something's not right.
Every witness noted in the police report says they either didn't see the shooting at all or corroborated Officer S's story, that Rashad had a gun. But their names are redacted on the report we got from the police, so we couldn't talk to them ourselves. Like one witness who says Rashad showed him a silver gun half an hour before the shooting, just before he walks into frame here. After that, we see Rashad cross the street with friends. We see him sit on a stoop. We see him talk to someone in this green van. Another witness says he saw Rashad try to hide a gun in his pocket after Rashad ran into the backyard. But it's unclear if the witness saw the shots being fired because he says he crouched down and ducked after he heard someone yell, "Gun, gun."
So after we did that initial interview with you, I went back and looked at every police officer account. And
A month after our interview with Art, I mapped out what each officer told Dipra about the day Rashad was killed and noticed that one more officer wasn't where he said he was. We'll call him Officer P. Officer P told Dipra investigators he was the passenger in the second car in the caravan, that he ran through the empty lot to a pickup truck that was right here in the middle of the lot. Then he says he saw Rashad point a silver pistol at Officer S, that Officer S fired 3 shots, and that Rashad fell down in the patio. Now, here's Officer P, and here is when the shots were fired. He is clearly not in the middle of the lot by the pickup truck. He's in front of the house, on the sidewalk. This is the view from there.
It's a little icy.
Art and another law enforcement expert reached the same conclusion.
You brought up a very, very interesting point. It appears there's some definite question as to the truthfulness of his statement.
What does this police officer's account do to the overall investigation?
It taints it. There's a saying out there that we use that you can't make a bad shooting good, but you can make a good shooting bad. And I think this is a case of making a good shooting look bad. To me, based on the stuff that we've seen already, I still go back to where did that gun come from? It strikes me as odd that they wouldn't do an ATF trace on that weapon. It's just like policing 101. I think a reinvestigation of the overall shooting is definitely warranted.
I've been pushing the Cook County State Attorney's Office and IPRA about the lingering question our investigation uncovered. Why are there no records of the gun being traced? What about the sergeant? What about Officer P? How could they close the case when there were so many questions left unanswered? IPRA has faced criticism in the past. About a year after Rashad's death, a local government watchdog found that of the 400 police shootings IPRA investigated since 2007, only one of those shootings was deemed unjustified. IPRA was deemed so badly broken by the city of Chicago, it was reorganized and renamed COPA in 2017. In July, 3 weeks after my initial email, I heard back from the Cook County State Attorney's Office, who said they had no intention of reopening the criminal investigation into Rashad's shooting. And then in August, I get an email.
Remember the wrongful death lawsuit that Cynthia Lane filed against the city of Chicago? One day before the release of this documentary, we got the transcripts of 8 depositions from the city of Chicago from 2015 and 2016 of the officers who were at the scene of the shooting. My team and I read through them. And it appears the dots are reporting connected line up. In these transcripts, the sergeant and Officer P have walked back some of the prior statements they made to IPRA, and they've acknowledged, after viewing the video that contradicted their earlier accounts, that they weren't where they said they were. Officer P said his timing was a bit off, that he was not in the empty lot when the shots were fired. And while he still said in his deposition that he was looking at Rashad, he now says he didn't see Rashad fall on the porch after all. And the sergeant said that he misjudged where he was. And remember the one officer who said he didn't see a gun on the porch? Now he says that he did see a gun on the porch that day.
It was one of the most high-profile police shootings in the country, putting a national spotlight on the city of Cleveland and casting a shadow over its police department. Now the officer who pulled the trigger and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice once again has a badge. We just found out that after being fired here in Cleveland, Officer Timothy Lohman has a new job as a part-time police officer.
News 5 CNN affiliate WTOV just spoke with the Bel Air police chief about the controversial hire. News 5 anchor Frank Wiley live tonight to break down his reasoning and has some reaction from Tamir's mother.
Yeah, this is where it all began and ended. The police chief down there saying that Lohman deserves a second chance because he was never charged in that deadly shooting. And tonight, Tamir Rice's attorney expressing her deepest concerns.
His client says there's no confusion.
It sends a dangerous message to citizens that killing a child doesn't matter.
Subodh Chandra, the attorney representing Tamir Rice. Former Cleveland police officer Timothy Lohman shot and killed her son, Tamir.
Lohman has been a disaster, and in Cleveland, an unmitigated disaster.
But Bel Air, a southern Ohio town, just hired Lohman for its police department in a part-time role.
He told me everything that took place in that incident. I made the phone calls. I talked to the appropriate people. I'll stand behind this officer, like I will any of my officers.
It was disturbing to Ms. Rice to hear that Lohman is yet again going to be a police officer.
November 14th, 2014. The grainy video from Cadell Rec Center shows the final moments of Tamir's 12-year-old life.
It's probably fake, but you know what? Scaring the guy. Yep.
Someone said Tamir was pointing a gun. It was a toy. The caller did say it looked fake. That message wasn't relayed. Seconds after arriving, Officer Lohman pulled the trigger.
Officer Lohman has absolutely no business being on any police force anywhere.
And Lohman was fired last year after it was discovered he lied on his application. He's appealing that decision. Live in Cleveland, Frank Wiley, News 5.
And tonight we are digging deeper into those red flags on Lohman's record that got him fired but didn't stop him from being hired here in Cleveland. As we reported back in December of 2014, shortly after that shooting, Cleveland police admitted they hadn't read Lohman's personnel file from the Independence Police Department before hiring him. If they had, they would have learned he was about to be fired for his lack of maturity and for having an emotional meltdown during firearms training. In November of 2012, the deputy chief said in a letter, that Loman was distracted and weepy during the training, couldn't follow simple instructions or communicate clearly, and that his handgun performance was, quote, abysmal. Before they could fire him, Loman resigned in December of 2012.
This is 33-year-old Robert Johnson. He's unarmed, he's nonviolent, he's on his cell phone making a call as these 4 officers repeatedly harass him. Now, these officers are from the Mesa Police Department. They're here on a domestic disturbance call. They frisk Johnson, then they tell him to move over to the wall. He complies, but things take a grim turn when he gets off the phone. Now, if this video looks like totally unprovoked attempted manslaughter to you, well, that's because it is. That's exactly what happened. And how did Mesa Police Department react to the surfacing of this video? Predictably.
Mesa Police say he was arguing and refused to sit down when they told him to.
And then they proceeded to put the 4 officers on paid leave. Now let me tell you something. These people are cowards. They're not here to serve. They're not here to protect. These subhuman mistakes are here to enact vengeance on society because of their personal inferiority complex by abusing the trust given to them by those who pay their salary. There's no fear here. It's just pure hatred. It's pure anger. And this is why we criticize police brutality, not purely from a racial standpoint. Race is just the component that compounds the likelihood of someone becoming a victim. After all, this is the same department that Phillips Brailsford was an officer at when he executed Daniel Shaver, an innocent, unarmed white man begging for his life on his hands and knees. Philip was acquitted and was fired from Mesa Police Department, but not for cold-blooded murder. He was fired for departmental misconduct, for unsatisfactory performance. What happened? Did he not beat suspects hard enough? Was he too easy on them? Now, do you want to know why people hate cops? This is the textbook definition of why. 1, cops start harassing a person they deem a suspect. 2, they wait till he's off the phone to beat the doors off of him. 3, and this is the most important part, not a single one of the other good cops try to stop the bad cop from pummeling the victim's skull even after he is clearly unconscious. 4, the other cops actually end up hog-tying the victim, further treating him as less than human. 5, they eventually arrest the victim for suspicion of disorderly conduct and hindering. And finally, 6, these cops get paid leave. They most likely won't be fired, and even if they are fired, they will end up getting a job at another police department, and the cycle of violence will continue. And there are examples of this. Deontay Yarber's murderer, who unloaded 30 bullets into him in a Walmart parking lot, was fired from a previous precinct for blatant racism. This flagrant lack of respect for human lives is what puts police lives at risk. This lack of accountability is why people hate cops. This violence that affects all Americans, black and white, is why people hate cops. It's not the people who take a brave stance against this brutality and have the courage to ask for accountability that are causing this problem. It's those who perpetrate this violence and others who allow these cruel acts to continue who truly put police officers' lives at risk. Getting angry at black athletes kneeling when they're kneeling for you is no different than getting mad at the doctor who tells you you have cancer. You have to acknowledge and understand a problem before you can fix it. Because I think we can all agree that it's better to kneel during the national anthem than have a 300-pound cop kneel on your windpipe during a routine traffic stop.
So, what's going on, sir?
You're being detained, is what's going on.
Why?
Detained for what?
Last name is Harris.
For what?
First name is Timothy, common spelling. Middle name is Clarence. Date of birth is 9/15 of 83, code 3. Why are you taking your stuff off? Put your hands in your pockets, man. Why are you handing me your stuff?
I'm being detained, right?
Have a seat.
Whoa, what are you doing?
Yeah, go and run 1039.
I'm being detained.
Put your hands behind your back.
Here, man.
Put your hands behind your back. I didn't ask you to get out of the car.
I'm saying I'm getting out of that car.
Do not move.
Calm down.
Do not move for me, man.
Calm down.
Bring your arms back towards me.
Calm down. Jeez, I'm not doing
Face that way.
Jesus Christ. You really, huh? Thank you. Are you happy now? I thought you didn't want. Dude,
Why are you doing this? I'm trying to take you to my car.
No, you're not. I'm walking with you.
Dang.
What are you doing?
No, you need to jail.
Start me back, 1039. Get back.
You cannot do that.
Get back. I need you to step back, please.
Ask me nicely.
Step back.
Ask me nicely. Because I'm not
I
doing
just said step
anything
back.
wrong. You asked me nicely.
You're about to get pepper sprayed. Step back.
What? You're gonna pepper
Step
spray
back.
me? You're gonna pepper. Is your webcam on? Is
Stop.
your body cam on?
Stop.
You're back. I'll be talking to you.
Stop trying to get up.
Okay.
Get on your stomach.
Get off of his
You need to back up.
I did back up.
Okay. Get your legs out. Do not try and get up.
I'm not. I'm not.
Stop trying to get up. Back up. Stop. Stop trying to get up. Stop trying to get up, dude. What is your deal?
Dude, I'm not trying to get up. You're laying on me.
Stay. Do not do that. Get back. Stop. Stop.
What are you doing?
Stop.
Dude, get off of me. Man, you punching
Stop
me.
trying to get up.
I can't breathe.
Stop. Yes, you can.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe, please. Please.
Stay there. I'm busy. Keep it coming. Stop.
Right here. I'm trying to breathe. I'm trying to breathe, sir. Please. I don't want no trouble, please. Please, help me up. I can't breathe.
Stop. I'm not on top of him. Keep backing up. Stop trying to get up. Stop trying to get up. It's a pepper spray. Take that team here. Get her. I'm good. Hold on a minute. You got it? .434. We have 2 in custody. Go and start AMR 1039.
Go ahead. Hold on. You ain't going nowhere. I know. Just hang tight for me, okay? Hang tight for me, okay? Get it off. Okay. Hold on. All right. Just sit down for me.
10th and going to the east.
Okay, hold on, but you're bleeding.
Huh?
Let me get some gloves on, okay?
It's just these 2. She needs to go for disobey lawful order.
Okay. She didn't do nothing. Neither did I. Grab him real quick for me while I get my gloves on.
Just stay there, man.
Wipe my eyes.
I've got
please.
AMR coming for you. They're gonna wipe your eyes.
No, wipe it now,
I
please.
cannot wipe your eyes yet.
A Topeka police officer and the city of Topeka are being sued after a man claims the officer beat him and broke his jaw. Today, KSNT News obtained the police body cam footage that shows the confrontation.
And we do want to warn you that it may be disturbing to some.
Put your hands in your pockets, man.
Dude,
Why are you doing this? I'm trying to take you to my car.
No, you're not. I'm walking with you.
Oh, you need to chill.
Stop.
What are you doing?
Stop.
Dude, get off of me.
Now tonight, KSNT News reporter Willis Scott digs deeper into the video.
And he joins us live from downtown Topeka now to tell us how that confrontation started. Willis.
Brooke and Jace, this incident happened in East Topeka back in January. In the video, the officer says he had 2 motivations for stopping the man. Officer Christopher Janes initially told Timothy Harris he couldn't park where he was. After taking his ID, he asked him about a reported theft.
How come your girlfriend keeps calling us and telling us that you have her stuff?
In the video, Harris said his girlfriend was welcome to come get her items and he wasn't illegally parked. Officer Janes then told Harris he was being detained. As Janes was walking Harris to the police car, Harris ended up on the ground. Janes held him there for a couple minutes.
I can't breathe.
Stop. Yes, you can.
You can't see it in the video, but Harris's passenger said Janes beat him while he was on the ground. Harris had told other officers Janes had targeted him.
This dude already knew who I was before he pulled me over.
Janes said there was a warrant for Harris's arrest.
You said you already knew why.
You got a warrant. I knew you have a warrant.
No, you said about some...
Now, we got the body cam video from the city today. The city told us they can't comment on the video or the lawsuit because of a policy that doesn't allow them to talk about current litigation. Live in downtown Topeka, Willis Scott, KSNT News.
Thank you, Willis. And we are looking more into this situation for you to get answers. Here's what we know right now. According to Topeka Municipal Court records, Harris was found guilty of unlawful parallel parking and interference with law enforcement. Battery and disobeying charges were dismissed.
And police say Janes is still working with the department tonight. Here's what we're still working to find out for you. If there was an active warrant for Harris when he was arrested, we need to know that, and what exactly the injuries were for Harris when he sustained those.
And we do want to point out that the civil rights attorney representing Harris, Andrew M. Stroth, is also representing Dominique White's family. The family is suing 2 other Topeka police officers, Justin Mackey and Michael Cruz, shot and killed White last year after they say he was reaching for a gun while he was running away from them. Prosecutors cleared the 2 officers of any criminal wrongdoing, and the police department said that they followed department policy.
All right, and we back on the forecast, and I want to say RIP to the ancestors, Jesse Washington, Will Brown, Cleo Wright, and so many others, too many to name, more than we'll ever know. Much respect to the ancestors. And I want to say RP to the brother Rashad McIntosh and the young brother DeAndre Terrell Farrell. At some point, enough has got to be enough, and we have got to start protecting ourselves and especially protecting our children. We'd rather fight to date other people than to fight for freedom. But the truth is, we don't need anybody else. Every time we keep to ourselves, we do great things. When everybody not in our business, black men and black women get along and we have great families. When we had no choice, we built great communities. We supported each other because we had no other choice and we became millionaires. We don't need anybody else to do what we have to do. We just have to learn how to protect ourselves. But if you insist on having a white girl and you need a white girl, first you have to destroy white supremacy. Use that as the motivation. But right now, black men can't even protect ourselves against white women. How are we going to protect our women and our children? And we'll continue to be in this cycle, and we'll continue to be subject to their rules, their laws, and their punishments until we put aside our tribal differences and do what we have to do. So, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.